Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the 1979 film Mad Max. You kind of see the poster there, directed by George Miller. Tagline is The Maximum Force of the Future. So this was an Australian film. Of course, launched what will become a really major franchise in sci-fi, action, dystopia. The way all those movies kind of straddle different genres together. And this film it was really, it felt fresh. I have to think it felt like a new voice as far as a movie that is very action driven, visceral. The story is set in, I think it says, a few years in the future or the near future in Australia, where it's as if we're in this world where we're at that point right before civilization is about to fall into chaos and decline. We're kind of in those final moments where people are still able to live their lives without as they had before, but the doom is just around the corner, whether it's going to be in environmental or energy crisis, all these factors that go into the Mad Max mythology. But anyway, we have Mel Gibson in a very early role as Mad Max, who is a highway patrolman for around Melbourne, Australia, and they are dealing with gangs of street people driving cars, trucks, and gangs, and basically terrorizing people on the highways of Australia. So the premise is almost like an old, the old juvenile delinquent movies of gangs who are terrorizing people, or even I think Clockwork Orange is also an influence on this movie. The idea of young street gangs, keeping people in fear and kind of running everything at night in society. So there's that dystopian aspect to it where people are not feeling safe because of the dangers presented by these kind of flamboyant gangs that are wreaking havoc everywhere. And Max, as a young patrolman, his partner is killed, and eventually his family is targeted by the gangs as well, which leads to tragedy. And ultimately, it becomes a vigilante story of Max seeking out revenge of what was done to him. So a little bit of Dirty Harry in there as well, or the Charles Bronson movies, where we get that vigilante narrative that was very much part of this era as well. I think just the main criticism of this film, and I would agree with it, is that the pacing feels a bit off at times, where it feels like some scenes should have been gone longer, maybe some scenes should have been shorter, maybe some certain characters needed a little bit more development, and there was also some scenes cut that I know that might have fleshed out the story a little bit. So that's my experience always watching this film, where visually, cinematically, it's fantastic, but it does feel a little rough when it came down to the edit of this film. Probably dealt with some of the limitations when they made the film. George Miller, who was a medical doctor, who decided to make a film. This idea had been in his mind a long time. In the ER, he had witnessed a lot of car accidents and injuries, and the idea of writing a movie about just a very vicious car culture was something that was with him. And as we know, the shoot was a hectic one, as many of these films were, especially for a first-time filmmaker and things like that. And there's also this comic book pulpy style to the movie as well, which I think also felt fresh in the late 70s, where it's not so much a social commentary about the environment, or whatever the issue happens to be dystopian movies are dealing with. It's more of an action-driven story, really, where we get a little bit of a sense of what's happening in the background, but it's all action-driven, and just the way Miller films cars chasing each other, and the big blue skies, and the open road, and just the spasms of violence that happen. It's all just really incredibly well done. I mean, the shots are really impressive and cinematic, which was I think something new brought to the genre that we hadn't really seen as much before. So there is that idea of a fresh voice in the movie, and that it's such a visceral story as well. Mad Max, and of course would lead to sequels and things like that. So I think this movie for the series is almost like a prologue, where we get the backstory of Max, and we get a little bit of world building, but really, though, it's just really a strong pulpy movie with kind of a comic book aesthetic to it. But there's also a realism and a visceralness to the movie as well that really makes it work and stand out. So yeah. So those are my thoughts on Mad Max. Thanks for watching.